Hey everyone, Kal Sahota here, VP of Possibilities with HeroX. We'll give everyone just a few seconds to sign on and we'll get started shortly. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. Keith, it's lunchtime for you. The rest of us are still morning people.
I usually eat lunch around 2 p.m. So.
Okay, well there you go. There you go.
Not by
choice,
right. Usually by
Okay, so it looks like we're live. Today we are pleased and excited to be speaking with Lockheed Martin's AlphaPilot Program Manager, Keith Lynn. Also with me today, we have our CEO and co-founder, Christian Cotichini. Hey, Christian.
Hello.
And our Director of Customer Success, Kyla Jeffrey. Hey, Kyla.
Hi, Cal.
So today we're going to be discussing how and why Lockheed Martin decided to turn to crowdsourcing for their AI drone technology competition. Thanks for taking the time to spend with us today, Keith. We really appreciate that your schedule is busy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So before we get kicked off, if any questions come up during the webinar, please feel free to post them in the Q&A chat box on your Zoom window. We'll dedicate a few minutes at the close of the webinar to address all the questions. So with that, let's get started. We can get kicked off with some introductions. I can get us started. I've already started a little bit. So as I mentioned, my name is Kal Sahota. My role with the team is the VP of Possibilities, which is just a really fun way of saying I get the pleasure of connecting with organizations all over the globe to speak to them about their innovation strategies and how we can implement crowd as a key component of that strategy. My background's pretty boring, 25 years in financial services. However, I've been with HeroX now for 4 years. Our team is virtual and I'm located in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. So that's a little bit about me. Kyla, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Cal. It's a pleasure to join you today. I am the Director of Customer Success at HeroX, and I've been with the team for about 3 years. In my role, I had the pleasure of working directly with Keith and the Lockheed Martin team to bring the AlphaPilot Challenge to life. So I'm really excited to be able to share a little bit more with you today about that. And as the Director of Customer Success, my role is really to support our biggest clients from companies like Lockheed to NASA and National Geographic on their open innovation strategies.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kyla. Thanks for being here. All right, Christian, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name's Christian Cotichini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HeroX. I've been a long-time entrepreneur. And I met Peter Diamandis on a sabbatical. Actually, sabbatical where I also went to the Galapagos, and the diving there is awesome. By the way, we were chatting earlier about that. And I met Peter Diamandis, the founder of XPRIZE, and we started collaborating, conspiring on the idea of creating a platform that lets anybody leverage the power of the crowd, which XPRIZE has been doing for over 2 decades now, working on grand challenges. That was the formation of HeroX. And we've created a platform that's been doing some amazing work, including the project we're going to talk about today.
Very cool. Thanks, Christian. All right, rounding things off, Keith, tell us a bit about you.
Sure. My name's Keith Lynn. I work at Lockheed Martin Corporation, which is an aerospace company. I've been there for just about 11 years now, and I've worn many hats in my tenure, but most recently I've had the privilege of being the program manager for our AlphaPilot Innovation Challenge. So I don't have a impressive title like manager of awesome possibilities and cool people or anything like that, but I've gotten to work with quite a few interesting people. HeroX has been fantastic. We also have partnerships with the Drone Racing League and NVIDIA on this program, which has been really cool. And it's a little bit atypical from traditional program management at Lockheed, which being a big government service provider is usually very structured, very much aligned to requirements and specific details. But this was kind of a loosey-goosey new thing for us doing a public innovation challenge. So a lot of creativity was involved, a lot of pivots, had to remain agile, and the great support from HeroX was really critical in making us successful in doing that.
Oh, that's great. with your introduction, I'm just so excited to dig in more into these questions now. Loosey goosey. I love it. Okay. So with that, let's jump into our first question. So Keith, let's start with the obvious question. What did you crowdsource? And tell us a little bit about the project itself.
Yeah, so I'll start with the origin of the project. So this was, let's see what year it was. It was probably early 2017. I was sitting at the Hilton Hotel across from the South by Southwest trade show. And we were there for something unrelated. And my vice president walks up and he says, the CEO wants to do something that gives back to the larger technology community using this, tax break that we received in the US from the Trump administration. And she wants to do an innovation challenge. And we don't really know what, but autonomy and artificial intelligence are really big. So some unlucky fool's going to be stuck leading this thing, and we're going to go figure out who that's going to be. And I had literally just got done talking to my immediate boss about how I was getting kind of bored with my job. And I just said, hey, I'll do it. Sounds weird. I like weird. Let's go. Let's rock. So that's how it started. And, there weren't any real requirements other than it had to be awesome and it had to involve autonomy. And I kind of made up the requirements as I went along. And, sometimes I just said, it's got to be this way. And someone eventually pushed back and said, no, it's got to be that way. And
gotcha.
Now I have a requirement there. So, so to get to the point, the focus was on autonomous systems and specifically around drones. And we didn't know it had to be drones at first. We were thinking, should we do ground vehicles? Should we do boats? What should we do here? But drone racing was this newer sport. It's been around about 3-4 years now. And we thought, hey, this has already captivated a lot of people. Maybe we should leverage that and see if we can put a new spin on it and make it autonomous. So that's what we decided to do. And we structured a challenge that would basically pick the best of the best out there that we think could do this to a caliber that was worthwhile to put on national television, which is our aim.
That's so great.
Yeah.
That's so great. Love that early part of the story. I didn't realize it. There's so much there. That's so great. Christian, love to have you chime in here. So what did you think when you first heard about this project? I know you worked very closely at the early stage of the engagement. So specifically, how did it compare to some of the other projects that we have on HeroX?
Well, our introduction to Lockheed was kind of funny. It was kind of wasn't through the front door. It wasn't even through the back door. It was kind of through the side window. I think, Keith, you approached us because you probably know the story better than me, but all I remember is that company had some questions about running a challenge. Some of them were quite technical and wanted to schedule a call. So we scheduled a call, and I think you talked a little bit about the challenge, and it was pretty cool. And we were just helping you out, and then I think you guys asked questions about HeroX, and in a relatively short period of time that included filling out a 80-page cybersecurity questionnaire and the procurement process, which, by the way, Keith, I did on a flight between Washington D.C. and Vancouver. Quickly to hosting your challenge, and we were impressed with the vision of the challenge, and we're really excited that we had opportunity to help you guys out with it, and I think it's worked out quite well.
Thanks, Kirsten. So Keith, Lockheed Martin, obviously a huge organization. In fact, I think the last I checked, the market cap was over 100 billion. So no doubt you have a very talented employee base. with all kinds of in-house talent, why did your CEO want to crowdsource?
Yeah, so the focus on crowdsourcing was more about shaping the future and creating content that would resonate with people, that would get them excited about technology. I think most people I know at Lockheed, myself included, were hugely inspired by, you know, the mission to the moon years ago, and
Yeah.
you look back at what something like that did. A small percentage of people were actually involved, but so many people decided to go study, physics or aerospace or mathematics or something, decided to work at NASA, just because they thought it was so cool, right? And it took something that was rocket science and very obscure and made it a public domain kind of a thing, right? Everybody had ownership in it, right? And that's what we were really going for. And we realized that our future as a business is dependent on technologies and skill sets that are just in their nascency now.
Mm-hmm.
And our major challenge over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be building a brand and building a compelling narrative and story that makes people want to study these fields and makes them want to come work in aerospace. We have missions on the horizon to go back to the moon. The first female to set foot on the moon is a big one right now. It's Project Artemis with NASA. We have Mars 2030 or 2035, I can't remember. But there's some really cool things going on that people should be aware of, and they should be aware that, hey, the things that you're studying right now are going to put you in the hot seat for these amazing things in years to come. And that's really why we decided to do this as an external challenge, not to showcase what talent we already have, but to inspire other people to say, like, hey, these things are the skills we need to be successful in the future. And we know that you can do it. And we want to give you a great venue to showcase that.
It's interesting how you just finished that off, because as you were speaking, that's literally what was occurring for me is, how do you inspire? It sounds like, that seems to be the core of what it is that you're really wanting to accomplish. And by the way, I'm happy going to the moon, although I don't think I'd meet the height requirement. I don't know. All right, so Kyla, so this one's over to you. Building on that a bit, can you tell us about who the crowd was that actually participated in the challenge and who ultimately won?
Absolutely. So it was a challenge that was inspiring and compelled an awful lot of people to come and see it and talk about it, to compete. And it was really cool to see that crowd develop. It happened in just a few short months. Keith and his team did an awesome job talking to different university students and academics and really activating the academia community in the US and Canada. And we also saw a large international participation. So altogether, we had just over 2,600 people from 75 different countries around the world.
Wow.
Which is amazing. And from those 2,600 people, there ended up being over 400 teams, and actually 80 teams that participated in some part of the qualifier test that we had. From that, there was a very rigorous evaluation and scoring. It was not an easy task by any means. And they ended up with 9 qualifying teams, which will now be working over the summer to get ready for the Drone Racing Leagues series this fall. Which is super exciting. And in addition to those, there was also 13 honorable mentions, because the kind of quality and caliber was just so great that we wanted to make sure we recognize those additional people.
That's so great. At this stage, do you know a little bit more about the actual competitors? Like, were they architects? Were they tinkers in the garage? Do we know much about, like, what kind of, how it spread across?
Great question. So a lot of them were students working in kind of artificial intelligence and deep learning, machine vision. So quite a few people from academia. We also had some small companies that participated and other people in that field. Keith, I know you've actually been working closely with these teams over the summer. Is there anything else that you would add from your collaboration with them?
Yeah, it's, I think you got it. Most of them were in the academic sphere in some capacity, either as students, undergrad, graduate. Some are professors, student-professor combination teams, which is really great to see. We do have a few teams that are multinational. So they, those honorable mentions that you were talking about, Kyla, some of the individuals in those teams got recruited to join the winning teams. We gave them a grace period where they could modify and add to their teams after they were selected. So it was great to see them recognizing other talent through the HeroX platform and actually recruiting those individuals. And now we actually have one team that started as 2 individuals in Sweden, and now they have representatives from South Korea, Australia, and the United States on the team, which is really interesting considering that all of their development is happening on a computer that's only located in Sweden. So I'm eager to see how they manage that workflow, but it's really interesting. You know, it's just a great study of how people are working and how these new fields like artificial intelligence are changing work dynamics too, to see people halfway around the world coordinating on code development and producing a vehicle that flies on its own.
So global, right? Like literally, you're bringing
Yeah,
the
very
world
global.
closer together.
So Lockheed Martin is a US-based company, and we marketed very heavily, as Kyla mentioned, to US universities. I did a 10 university roadshow where we were just, you know, day to day, week to week, one university to another, from coast to coast. Had so many slices of pizza that I don't think my body will ever forgive me, but it worked out really well. But surprisingly, we only had 3 of our 9 teams from the US, so it's primarily an internet.
So powerful. That's so powerful. So how long, guys, did we run the challenge? It was just a few months, right, Kyla, you mentioned? So how many months was it?
So we announced it in the fall and officially kicked off in January. And the teams had, I think it was about 2.5 months, right, Keith, to kind of work on their submissions and submit to the various tests that we had for them. So
then we had 2,600 individuals mobilized in just a few months. That's pretty powerful stuff globally. So that's great.
I love watching the map feature on your website every week just to see where new dots pop up. How did they hear about this?
So Keith, prior, and I think you've already kind of answered this, but prior to AlphaPilot, were you familiar with crowdsourcing? And if you were, is it just something that you read about or that you heard about, or had you crowdsourced previously? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, in a vague sense. A lot of the individuals in my industry work with DARPA doing their grand challenges.
Yeah.
Some have done other one-off competitions, usually with research laboratories. And then I've heard of some X prizes and things like that going on because it's related. Some of them have been related to things that we work on with space travel and whatnot. So I would say loosely, but the inner workings, certainly not.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Your answer is pretty consistent to, I think, the conversations that I have as well with clients across the globe. There's a curiosity, there's an interest, and it's seen as definitely a way to innovate. But it's oftentimes when I work with clients, very few, Kyla, I think you'd agree, have actually done it before. So I think it's wonderful being the first to actually walk them through it. So it's great. All right, guys, so let's do a little bit of a shift here. So Christian, this one's for you. So as a thought leader in this space, you stay in the know to ensure that HeroX is well positioned to support brands like Lockheed Martin. Tell us a bit about what you're seeing trending specifically in open innovation.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So everybody, we live in interesting times, right? So I think historians will look back at the history of the human race and divide it into 2 major epochs, which will be before the internet and after the internet. The analog era and the digital era, if you will. And what's interesting about the internet is it means that innovation and change is driven by network effects, and network effects have been studied. pretty extensively in various fields of science. And basically, what happens is the rate of innovation is just driven often by network effects, often using exponential dynamics, and just happens quickly. So nowadays, the rate of change in the marketplace is just far faster. Think about the smartphones. I mean, my kids, we watch movies. They can tell, they can tell, how old the movie is by, the whether or not they're the kidnapper is grabbing the person's smartphone and making sure the GPS isn't going to, give away their location. The Stranger Things, they have to have CB radios, which I wish I had in the 80s, but I didn't. That was a ripoff. But because how do you put a story together without instant messaging, right? So you got to have these kids in the 80s running around with radios. So anyways, so the rate of innovation is faster and faster, and companies are struggling to keep up. And this is a problem that every leader feels, whether it's in government or private sector. And I've studied innovation a lot since founding HeroX, and have been an innovator myself for the majority of my career. So the only answer I know that really will scale is an open innovation model of using the actual network effects that I talked about that are driving the rate of market innovation to help accelerate the rate of organizational innovation. And so I think that we're going to start seeing crowdsourcing as a common model for organizations, just to be competitive, to access the new talents and skills, to get the ideas on how to adopt new technologies like AI, and I think that's going to become more and more commonplace.
That's great. Keith, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, with what Christian just shared, I mean, being obviously a part of a large corporation, are you sensing and feeling much the same, especially now that you've sipped the Kool-Aid of crowdsourcing? Would you see that as something that you would definitely apply again?
Yeah, definitely. There's certain fields, as Christian mentioned, like artificial intelligence, that are seeing a really broad democratization right now. Traditionally in the aerospace industry, you would source talent from a very select number of locations, typically universities that receive Department of Defense grant money or NASA grant money, or from ex-military and astronaut kind of things like that, because that's where the concentration of education and everything was. But now you have people that can accumulate enough hours through open source curriculums and kind of low cost training that you never really know where the next innovation is going to come from.
Yeah.
We want to be forward leaning at Lockheed Martin. We want to tap into that. We think it's a big paradigm change on not just where you source talent, but how you attract talent. There's tools now that like HeroX, like innovation challenges, that let you put something out there and let the talent come to you. If they're inspired by your business and by the prospect of something, some kind of a rewarding challenge or opportunity to showcase their ability, then why not do it that way?
Yeah.
I think it's, Lockheed Martin is a very structured company. We service the government, so we can't have runaway profit margins, and we can't pay people multi-million-dollar salaries right out of college like some of our Silicon Valley brethren can do. So we have to use different approaches. We have to entice people by the rewarding nature of the jobs that we do and the missions we perform, and to give people a sample of that and let them showcase what awesome work they can do and let them see how they fit into this puzzle, so to speak, of building this awesome future is a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, it's really great. It's interesting what you say related to government. It's so powerful that, NASA, for example, has been crowdsourcing for over a decade. And you would think typically government is slow moving and boring and they're going to try it after, but it seems in so many ways that government is actually further ahead as it relates to this specific topic. than most large brands, and maybe it's just hesitation, but I think that's pretty powerful. And I'm interested to hear, Kyla, from you. We've talked a lot about this fun technology, AI, and machine learning and drones and all this fancy stuff. But do you find that a lot of the projects that come onto HeroX, how many of them are that technical?
That's a really great question. We see everything you could imagine on HeroX, from deep technical ones like what Lockheed ran, where you do need to have some background in machine learning and AI to be able to compete, to ones where absolutely anyone can come in and submit a solution. Everything from, a couple $1,000 prize to design a new bottle cap for AB InBev to, $2.5 million prizes like the one that Lockheed ran.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So Keith, I'm going to throw a two-part question at you. Two-part question, pretty simple. Okay. So firstly, how did you get introduced to the HeroX platform? And the second part of that question is, as we've already talked about a little bit, is being such a large organization, you clearly would have gone through and done a lot of your due diligence. And I emphasize a lot, as Christian has, sitting in the airplane, ticking boxes. So, you've obviously ticked all the boxes and you were given the green light. So what set HeroX apart and made you ultimately select this team?
Yeah, so when we were going through the logistics of how to do this, it became readily apparent that the processes in place at a large company, specifically working in the defense and military and government industries, to do something that required a significant amount of public exposure, like an innovation challenge, and to try and manage that internally, where everybody is busy, working their day jobs more or less. We very quickly realized we had a bandwidth problem and we had a process problem. We needed to crank something out fairly quickly, and the processes would just never allow that. The risk mitigation, from a cyber IT perspective, from a PR perspective, nobody felt like this was their bread and butter, and nobody had the hours to put into doing it to meet the level of risk mitigation and due diligence that everybody expects at our company. So we were just the system was getting gummed up, and we realized we needed some outside help. And my deputy at the time, who is much more hip than I am and is very active on Twitch and Reddit and everything like that, he just came back to me and he's like, "We got to talk to HeroX." And I was like, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, they run innovation challenges exactly like we want to do, and they seem really awesome. Let's set up a call and a walkthrough." And we did that, and it's like I forget who the first person we spoke with, but everyone at HeroX, it's like they could read our minds and our biggest fears and just put them at ease right away. I don't know how else to say it. And you just understood the behemoth of a big company, and you're like, "Okay, look, I'm sure that you're worried about these things." And we're like, yes, we are. I'm sure this is a big headache for you. I'm like, "Oh my God, you don't have any idea how big a headache that is." So, it's just so the responsiveness was incredible. Like Christian was saying, we threw a dossier of IT security protocols at you, and you got back in a record amount of time, which was just incredible. My contracts negotiators were calling me. They're like, "This company is awesome. They're so responsive to everything. We never get subcontractors that are this amazing." So it was just great from the get-go. The people, the personalities were fantastic. You got on board very quickly with our vision, and you said, "Hey, this sounds like a real cool challenge. We want to be a part of it." And just everything from the IT security to risk management to shaping the plethora of experience that you had running previous challenges, and how to go about certain details of managing the outreach, managing the people who sign up. All very valuable things that we just never dealt with before. So once we got introduced, we knew pretty quickly that this was the pathway we wanted to go down.
That's great. Definitely is not our first rodeo, which is, I think, where you sensed a lot of the discovery questions and the needs assessment is, we're so familiar with dealing with not only large brands, but also small and mid-sized organizations. And we come prepared to each conversation and really customize it to who it is that we're speaking to. So it's a pleasure to hear that it actually occurred that way for you.
Yeah, my only regret is not finding you guys sooner, because we definitely could have used your help in shaping the T's and C's of this challenge, and so to speak, and from an early stage. And it's funny, my CTO said very early on, don't hero this, don't take on too much on your own. So now I can say I didn't hero it, HeroX hero.
HeroX hero it. That's a really great regret to have, that you didn't hear about it sooner. Kyla and Christian, you guys were, I took part, I think, in the very first call, but I think it very quickly moved, down the level of engagement where Keith and his team have decided, okay, it's definitely HeroX. And that's usually the part of the conversation I take part in, is just, making sure that the client is clear on what it is that we do and what service we deliver. But once that's done, then I pass them over to Kyla. So Christian, Kyla, what occurred for you guys in the first few meetings that you had, other than this is so cool, which is what I'm sure one of you were going to say.
Definitely had a "this is so cool" moment. I guess a couple things occurred for me. One is it's a big project working on a really quick timeline, and I was just amazed at Lockheed's ability to work within that timeline, and really for Keith being able to kind of bring his organization together. I think he's such a champion for innovation and reflected the innovation culture at Lockheed. I think from the time we got all those security protocols signed off to launching, it was maybe a week to 10 days before we had it up on the platform. And it's so great to be able to work so nimbly on that.
That's so great.
And if I can add one thing,
Sure.
I forgot to mention that the platform itself was a really big driver of us making that decision. We were looking at what it would take to host this on our own website, and I think at one point they said, well, we can set it up for you, but every single registration and every single question is going to come to your personal inbox.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, we can't have that. And then when we saw the platform and we saw all the different tabs for forum discussions, for maps, like the fact that it helped people build teams and it wasn't just something you would register once you already had a team. We just this is everything we wanted, but we're struggling to do internally. So huge discriminator.
It's so interesting you say that, because there's so many organizations that we actually chat with when they've actually decided to build their own platform, and either they've already built it or they're partway through. So now they feel married to this platform, and they talk to us. They're like, oh, if I only had talked to you 6 months ago, I would never have done this. So it's interesting allowing, it's really kind of like crowdsourcing, right? Allowing those individuals that are really good at something to really lean into their unique ability, and providing the platform support is something that from our clients we're hearing that it's something that we do well. So it's great that it occurred that way for you as well. Christian, anything to add?
Oh, well, I'll just add that. I've worked with lots of big tech companies, lots of big bricks and mortar companies, government agencies, all that. Way too many, way more than I care to admit over my career. HeroX is my fourth tech company that I've founded. So I have a lot of experience, and I've developed a real respect for the challenges in big organizations. I'm a big believer in the power of the organization, and that includes big, enterprises and government agencies. I think that in many ways, the modern organization is one of the greatest inventions of humankind in terms of our ability to, create the organizations and civil. We take it all for granted very much, but but I also understand there's huge challenges in the dynamics of large organizations, and the inevitable bureaucracy that creeps in that every organization has to deal with, just to manage their affairs. And there's always this tug of war between things like moving quickly and being responsible and all that. So anyways, Lockheed, like Keith, I don't know if it was you or if it's the organization, but you did a really great job of keeping things moving fast. And I think it just working with you guys, and just the very just the rate of action, the decision making, the simplicity of working with you guys, and the adaptiveness. We did go through some, how are we going to do this, and we want to have virtual environment to test the AI algorithms. Okay, well, let's figure that out. And so you guys moved pretty quickly, and I think it's a testament to the culture of your organization, that you guys are as big as you are, and we had a great experience with you guys as a vendor. The procurement process, that we'll talk about that some other time.
That's a conversation all unto itself.
Yeah. So but every organization has a big procurement process, especially when they do government processes or contracts, because in many ways they don't have a choice about the bureaucracy creep, if you will. But you guys did a great job, and I think the success of this challenge, and really, if you think about it, we're less than a year through it, and it's just moved so much has been done in months. And if you compare that to what internal projects do in terms of feasibility and budgeting and planning and resourcing and all that, it's moved lightning speed, and I think it's going to be a really great feather in Lockheed's cap.
And by the way, when he does talk about the procurement process, he's going to have probably a bottle of wine, probably about here.
Scotch.
And may not have a glass. He might just put a nipple at the top. I don't know. I'm just have a vision here. I'm not.
Well, it's behind me now, so.
So, from my listening, it sounds like your team was really well supported throughout the entire process. That said, Keith, what would you say was the most challenging part about running the AlphaPilot project so far?
Yeah, you're right in that we had tremendous support all the way from senior leadership of the company down, and that this was, so I work in the CTO's office, and that's a great place to really do innovative things and to push the boundaries. So we had a lot of great C-suite level support here. I think the agility that Christian was mentioning is in part, due to the fact that we wanted to really show we can be very agile in doing this.
Sure.
And that was aided by the fact that nobody really had done something like this before at Lockheed. So I think there was a little bit of underestimating what it takes in certain aspects.
Sure.
So they're like, we could turn this around in 2 months, right? That should be no problem.
Right.
And then just a lot of pounding the pavement, really, just setting up rhythms with people. And this is getting to what I think was probably the most difficult challenge, which is, working with the cross functions, like working with legal, with, doing a challenge around artificial intelligence that's international, calls in this whole branch of the company that deals with international trade compliance, right? So we have to make sure that we're not violating any Department of Defense trade issues. We're not revealing any Lockheed Martin intellectual property or trade secrets around sensitive technology to certain countries or individuals. So there's all this overhead that goes into it, and to legal, from a legal side, from an IT security side, which was a huge one. The liabilities around, what if the the applicant information is compromised, right?
Mm.
What liability do we face? How do we make sure it's secure? We have participants from Europe, which in general have a much more sensitive data security, data collect protocol, right? So are we limited in the certain things we can collect from them, that we can ask them? And we have people who are very skilled in these things, and they're very thorough, and figuring out how to work with them and respect what they do, but also move at a pace that's necessary to keep this thing going. That was really challenging. And I had to ask questions to them in different ways. I had to stand up certain communication rhythms that they're not used to. So just kind of the growing pains of learning how to work in a way that's conducive to what we're trying to do.
It's really powerful what you shared. It's interesting. I was in Silicon probably about 4 or 5 months ago. A lot of the large organizations were there attending this conference, and that seemed to really resonate as one of the top areas where stuckage happens, where you have this is tremendously innovative way to approach problem solving, but then you're going to bring it into this old school corporate way of thinking, and to be able to move, as in your own words, at the agility that you need in order to make that project be successful, but maneuver the way we're used to doing business. That seems to be one of the biggest areas which shows up for many organizations, and that's what can cause stuckage. So let me ask you now that you've done this, now that it's not your first rodeo anymore, so if you had a second rodeo, do you feel that the learnings that you got from this would mitigate much of that large challenge that you had, or that big issue that showed up for you?
Yeah, definitely. There's certain areas where you hit, I won't call it resistance, but you're trying to basically go against the current. And it's much easier in the long run if you know where it's better to work with third parties, right? What issues it's not even worth trying to tackle internally.
Yeah.
Right. So, there were certain aspects of the communication around this that were difficult. There's certain aspects of IT security, as I mentioned, of contracting that were just extremely, extremely difficult. And it's just the processes in place don't allow it. So I would have just avoided fighting those uphill battles much sooner and found enabling partners like HeroX that could basically mitigate a lot of the risks that were preventing it from happening.
That's great. Thank you for that. So Kyla, over to you. So you've project managed, I don't know how many crowdsourcing projects, too many to count, I'm sure. You've collaborated with a number of great teams. So from your perspective, what made AlphaPilot a success?
Yeah, really good question. I think there's a few things. The first is just how compelling it is. And I know we've touched on this before, but I think it's a good point, is it's something that grabs people and they're inspired by it. They can connect to the vision that Lockheed Martin has, and they can get behind it. So it's not only of interest to the people with the AI expertise that are competing, but it's also of interest to a broader community that can kind of get behind it and care. And the incentive is not always kind of that easy to see, but in most crowdsourcing competitions, you can pull out some sort of kind of non-monetary incentive, if you will, that gets people behind it. And I think this one had a really strong one. Another thing that I think was really awesome was the partnerships that Lockheed put into place. So we were obviously working very closely with them, but they also partnered with the Drone Racing League for kind of really just to set the parameters and create the scope and the context for this competition, which was very powerful. And they partnered with MIT to be able to have some machine vision tests happening and AI tests. And that was very cool. So MIT provided their simulator that the competitors were able to use to actually do a qualifier online and be able to see which team was coming out best. So I think those partnerships they pulled together really helped to amplify the impact and the possibilities.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Kyla. So, okay, guys, so we have a couple more questions before we move into the Q&A. So just a A friendly reminder for our audience to please drop in any questions which are showing up for you right into the chat, and we'll get to them shortly. All right, Keith, so how did the challenge do? Tell us a little bit about the results. Did they meet your expectations so far?
Yeah, definitely. We weren't sure, we've been talking about how we have been doing something that we're not used to before, but putting this challenge together, but autonomous drone racing is something that nobody has done before, really. I mean, very, very few number of people you can count on, your fingers and toes that have ever attempted this. So we didn't know what it was going to take exactly. We approximated that the skill sets were there, and that people could do it, but we needed to design a qualifier that would, be difficult enough to narrow it down to the people who definitely could do it, but not too difficult that, nobody could do it. So we ended up, I think, with what was a really great combination of objective evaluations through simulation, which our friends at MIT helped us with tremendously, which is now an open source simulator for anyone who's interested. It's called Flight Goggles. You can check it out, try your hand at it. And then we also had a machine vision test based on identification of racing gates and other objects in imagery, which is another critical element of autonomous navigation. And then we had some more subjective elements where we had a judging panel from industry and academia, and we asked people more, this is a year-long competition, right? So there's some things that aren't necessarily just your know-how. It's how committed are you? How strong is your team? Have you worked together before? Do you have what it takes to endure through this? And I think the combination of those really led us to 9 fantastic teams, probably more like 15 fantastic teams, but for logistics, we had to down select the 9. And I'm very happy with the 9 that we have. I've had a chance to meet all of them in person. They're great people. They all bring something very unique to this, and I love their energy. They're part of the family now. We're hosting this, they're competing in it, but we commiserate on our challenges on both sides. We've been trying to field a brand new drone using a GPU from NVIDIA that's never flown before at all. So, that's not always a smooth process. And they've been very patient with us. We've worked with them very closely on modifying things, and they just, they're very happy to be part of this. And we're really, really excited to showcase them on television this fall and winter, and we just think it's going to be great.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're sharing that every individual brought something unique and something, their energy. And when we talk about tapping into the creativity of the crowd, oftentimes we say to organizations is you have no idea where your best and greatest idea lives. And that's really true, right? Because you had over 70 countries, I think it's 75, so represented in some of these results. And when you think about what it is that you're doing, there's over 3 billion people connected to the World Wide Web. You're sending out an open call to pretty much the world to say, give me your best. Just if you stand back and you think about the fact that you're literally inviting the world into your boardroom, there's such a power to that, and it's so counterintuitive to probably what you and I kind of studied when we went to school and our earlier days in our career. It's so counterintuitive to that, but that's actually where the future lives. And it's really powerful to hear, what you got out of it, especially when you share that how much it actually met your expectations and your results.
Yeah, and it's been great for us in ways that we haven't even imagined when we formed it. We have people contacting us from some of these countries saying, we just absolutely love that, a university from our country is involved in this, and we talk to you more about other things, and it's just been great.
Yeah, the residual PR, the conversations even after the fact, so powerful. Kyla, we look at the end result, which is, what the delivery of it all was. But, I mean, your team is very intimately involved throughout the entire process to make sure that every challenge actually stays on track. So tell us a little bit about, how you monitor and how do you measure success? How does that work? as you go along?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in terms of how you measure success, it's really based on what success is for the clients that we're working with. So part of our process at the beginning is getting really clear what success looks like for Lockheed or for whoever it is that we're working with so that we can measure success against that. Success is not always getting 2,600 people following your challenge. Sometimes it's actually finding the right two, maybe even one that has the solution that you're looking for. And so it's really understanding what your motivations are and then tracking metrics as we go. We're a very data-oriented organization. And so we're always looking at the data. We're measuring the health of every one of our challenges weekly and really tracking how they're going. With Keith and his team, we had weekly kind of check-ins throughout the duration of the project to make sure everything was on track. Because in addition to the crowd metrics and the people finding it, there's also some things that are going on in the background as well. So making sure that stays on track is also important for setting us up for success.
That's great.
I'd like to just say bravo on that metrics piece. I mean, it's another characteristic of big companies that everything you do has to be tracked by some kind of metric. So the ability to pull data off weekly and see deltas in participation and signups and things like that was very helpful to me as a program manager to explain to my leadership how things were going. So just bravo.
Yeah, we talked about that, right? You take new school innovation and try to put it into the corporate world. Having the metrics and the ROI and all of that to support what it is that you're up to is really kind of the place where we stand, which is why we make the metrics so easily accessible to all of our clients. So, all right, so rounding out the questions, one last one for you. So we've talked a lot today about what brought you to where you are today, the project, the journey. Now tell our audience, what's next for the AlphaPilot Challenge? Should the audience stay tuned for the drone races this fall? Tell us what's happening next.
Yeah, so the immediate exciting thing is the launch of the 2019 Artificial Intelligence Robotic Racing League, or AIR, that the Drone Racing League is set up in coordination with AlphaPilot, and we'll be announcing our race dates and locations very soon, as well as revealing our new Racer AI drone, which is really cool. It's a pretty neat looking drone, to be honest. It's pretty big and it's pretty cool. So the races themselves are tickets are going to go on sale on Ticketmaster. I say on sale, but they're free. We just do it that way for tracking purposes. So it's free to attend. They'll be televised on DRL's content on NBC Sports and on Twitter. And we're capturing the whole thing beginning to end, chronicling the trials and tribulations of these teams and of the development crew from DRL, from Lockheed Martin. And we're going to compile that into a documentary. So there's going to be a lot of great content to watch and go see in person. So very excited about that. Stay tuned for the announcement on the race locations and dates. Should be happening very soon, later this month. If it's in a town near you, please come join us, come say hi. Beyond that, we're looking into doing a season 2 of AlphaPilot and of AIR, and maybe expanding our horizons a little bit into more free online resources so people can do this at home. If they can participate in a very structured competition, they can at least gain the experience at their high schools, universities, or just at home. So lots of great things to look forward to.
That's so great. So with that, let's leave a bit of time, ladies and gents, just for some questions at the end. So again, a quick reminder for our audience to please simply drop the questions into the Q&A chat. If your question is for a specific panelist, please ensure you include their name in the question. Looks like we got quite a few, so we'll try to get through. We'll probably have time for a couple of them. And it looks like the first one that's here has already been answered, I'd say, Kyla, is what's your vision for the future of the competition? And Keith, that sounds like it's to you, but I think it sounds to me that you've kind of just answered that. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that?
I'll just add that I went through the logistics of the future of the competition, but really what we're trying to do is create a very visible platform for people in this field or aspiring to be in this field to showcase what they can do. So it's about exposure of the amazing things people are doing, and it's about celebrating their achievements and pushing the boundaries of the state of the art. I look back at how automobile racing helped galvanize interest in the car when, you know, it took over 30 some years from the car to being a thing to when people, you know, accepted it very much. And you know, it took time to reach a price point where more people get involved, but that was also driven by demand and interest. And I think today with artificial intelligence and autonomy, we can really accelerate that timeline through things like AlphaPilot and Air. And, you know, I think, you know, a lot of younger people today are intrigued by things like self-driving cars, but maybe not their parents or grandparents. And AI is really going to touch everybody's lives in some way, and autonomy in some way. So how do we go from grandparents being afraid of self-driving cars to thinking about it as the greatest thing, because now they don't have to ask their children to drive them to the doctor or the pharmacy. So just helping change that public discourse, I think, is our big legacy.
That's so great. It's really just the essence and power of innovation, really, isn't it? Just moving forward. So this next question, Christian, is for you. So with respect to AI innovation, especially when it comes to space technologies, how would outsourcing be handled under the ITAR agreement for non-US entities and citizens? Is outsourcing one way to overcome that obstacle?
Yes, that's a very good question. So a very technical question as well. So ITAR regulates weapon technologies and things like spacecraft, which can be, you know, if you put a bomb on a spacecraft, unfortunately, it's a missile, right? And other technologies. So when we get into space-related challenges and things like that, ITAR is always a challenge. So is FAA regulations and lots of regulatory things. Not to mention, you know, building spacecraft, by the way, involves usually large amounts of energy, which can be, you know, accidentally, you know, detonated. So there's insurance issues, you know, there's liability issues, there's regulatory issues, but with ITAR, FAA, and many others. So the good news is we've already gone through that with many challenges. You know, we have the Base 11 space challenge, which is to build the first student-built spacecraft to make it to space. And that involved ITAR regs and insurance and liability, and, you know, also helping coach the students to go to the dean of the university and say, hey, can we build a like high-powered spacecraft on campus, please, pretty please?
Do you mind?
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, the details of it are beyond the scope of, you know, the webinar today, but we've worked through all of these issues. There sometimes, you know, the answer is maybe not what people want, but in terms of international participation in this stuff, you know, we've pretty much mapped out the best ways to make that happen. And, you know, when we started HeroX, you know, everything from our social media profile to our Facebook followers, you know, we've always implemented a global first approach. You know, we've had more non-US Facebook followers since day one than US Facebook followers, for example, and we're very proud with the international participation we've created in these challenges. And so, you know, if people are interested in you know, doing something, feel free to reach out. We're happy to give you advice and help.
Yeah, that's great. So to the audience member who posed the question, if Christian didn't address your question thoroughly, or if you have something to follow up, just please reach out, and we'll be pleased to, you know, schedule maybe some one-on-one time. So we are pretty much at time, but I'm going to ask one last question here, Keith. So we're going to squeeze one in. Does Lockheed Martin have any other crowdsourcing projects coming up? And if you do,
that they can talk about.
That I was just going to say, that's the other part of it. If so, can you share any details?
There is a pipeline of innovation challenges that have been planned. Nothing outside of AlphaPilot has been announced yet, but it's something to look forward to. We're certainly interested in doing more.
So stay tuned is
Stay
what I'm
tuned.
hearing. All right. I love this.
And-
So
And if I can add, Keith, you'll be very excited to know that we've released a new licensing option, a subscription option for our platform, which provides all you can eat access to our platform
Oh, that's
rather than
wonderful.
paying a
That'll make
per
things
project
very,
fee.
very good for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, so we should definitely talk about that because it's very economical. So
good
Awesome.
stuff. All right. So on behalf of the entire HeroX team, Keith, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule today to participate in this webinar. For those of you attending today's webinar, if you'd like to learn more about how you can utilize the power of the crowd for your own projects, please don't hesitate to reach out. And remember, projects don't have to be huge and audacious. They can be simple as well. I mean, you can crowdsource for pretty much any subject area for any prize amount, so long as it's socially responsible, ethical, and legal, you can crowdsource it. We'll be sending a follow-up email with which will include our contact information, again, for any follow-up questions. Watch for upcoming webinars, you guys. So the next one is in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we see you guys there. And with that, we're going to sign off. So on behalf of Keith and our HeroX team, thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.